Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us today for the fourth installment in our How To Virtual Gala series. We appreciate you being here to share this journey into the virtual landscape. Some of you have been with us for all four webinars, and we are honored that you continue to take the time to learn with us. For those of you that are here for the very first time, welcome. We hope you find value in this conversation. As always, we start off with some introductions. I am Greg Quiroga. I'm the founder of Stellar Fundraising Auctions. I've been conducting and consulting on fundraising auctions since 2004. Been a virtual gala consultant since the beginning of March, and I need to update this slide because I've now raised over $2 million and counting online. I am joined by my good friend and associate, Beth Sandefur of Beth Sandefur Events. She is another virtual gala expert. She's doing more virtual galas in the Bay Area than anyone else, and she's not just working with Bay Area clients, she's producing virtual galas for organizations across the country. Beth's practical guide to conducting a virtual gala remains one of the most relevant, and it's a month old, which at this point feels like years. Some housekeeping. We're going to record this webinar and we'll send a link to all of you attendees after the fact, so feel free to take notes, never feel pressured to do so. And if you've missed any of our previous webinars, you can find them on our website at stellarsf.com/webinars. And if you are watching a recording of this webinar and would like to be part of the live conversation, please sign up for our announcement list at stellarsf.com. And before we launch into the meat of today's presentation, I want to say that there are so many technology options out there that it is really impossible to cover them all in one reasonably lengthed webinar. We could spend days talking about this. So, and we really realized this just as we were getting through the DIY portion of today's webinar. So we opted to cover two solutions in as much detail as possible within two categories: do-it-yourself and professionally produced. So what we're going to cover today: how a virtual gala works, different platforms for producing a virtual gala, program flow for your virtual gala, content creation for your virtual gala. As always, we'll touch on some top tips for a virtual gala, and at the end we'll have questions and answers. And if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to enter them into the Q&A bar. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. Put them in there early. We'll get to them in the order they come in. We're going to flow right through the presentation though, and then do the Q&A at the end. So you've been put in charge of your virtual gala. Now what? How does a virtual gala actually work? And this is one of those questions that's hard to answer because we've spent so much time with our nose so close to this grindstone that we kind of tend to say like, you put on a virtual gala and broadcast it to your attendees. But think of it like this. In a live event, you have one or two screens behind your stage where your videos and slideshows play, and you have your auctioneer and other speakers on stage and maybe at a podium. In the back of the room, there's a table with some AV guys and a bunch of computers that are controlling your slides and your video playback and turning mics on and off and making everything happen. Well, in a virtual gala, instead of screens in your ballroom, your screen is a laptop or a TV. And instead of just your videos and slides on the screen, your auctioneer and other speakers are on a screen as well. And instead of an AV table in the back of the room, there's an AV crew in an office somewhere with all the same computers, making sure everything plays at the right time and mics are turned on and off. And really, that's the cheeky, fast-talking auctioneer answer. We're going to go into much more detail here, but if you've been put in charge of your virtual gala, you have three overarching tasks ahead of you. You need to pick your platform, you need to craft your run of show, and you need to define your content. And the first question you need to ask is, what do you want your virtual gala to look like? And what you're really asking is, what platform are you going to use for your virtual gala? And this is arguably the biggest question you're going to answer about your virtual gala, because it is going to define what it looks like, who does the work, how much it costs. This is basically the equivalent of picking your location. And look, we work with events of all shapes and sizes, and we realize that not every location is appropriate for every event. Some organizations put a tent on Union Square for 750 people. Some do their event in a country club's dining room. That fine young gentleman there, Ed Gold, was going to be with us today, but had a client meeting come up, so he couldn't join us. But Ed'll be back in July for our next presentation. Some events happen in an airplane hangar, or the Four Seasons, or at Fort Mason, or in a church's multi-purpose room. And the point is that you need to do what is right for you. And if you've had an AV budget before, you're not going to be terribly surprised when you call for quotes. But if you've never had to pay for AV before, know that it takes a lot of expertise to make something look good in the virtual environment, and that what you're paying for isn't just someone to do your virtual gala. You're paying for the expertise they've developed doing many other virtual galas, in addition to the stability they can offer in terms of more reliable internet, professional broadcast software, video production, etc. So the first platform that we're going to cover is a do-it-yourself platform, and it's one you should all be familiar with because we're on it right now, and that is Zoom. If seeing your crowd is the most important element, or AV solutions just are out of your budget, then Zoom is the most used do-it-yourself option. Zoom enables self-production, but it does not make it easy. And it is nearly impossible for one person to produce an entire show seamlessly, which means you need to make a bunch of decisions about how you're going to do your show. And then you need to find and train people to fill those roles. And within Zoom, there are two production modes. There's meeting and webinar. So let's start with webinar, because like what we're doing today, webinar offers the greatest control over what attendees see. Zoom Webinar ensures that only your presenters' cameras are visible to attendees when you want them to be. You can have single or multiple cameras live at once, but if you have two, they appear side by side. But if you have more than two, eventually they start to stack Brady Bunch style. But in webinar, you can play videos, you can use virtual backgrounds, you can incorporate giving graphics like thermometers or live feeds of how people are pledging, etc. But it's really not possible in Zoom by itself to do picture-in-picture other than a tiny little window where your presenter is and a big screen sharing what the image is. You can do a lot with Zoom Webinar, but what you cannot do easily is customize the look and feel. And it can be done, but I'm not even going to touch on the details of the how, because we're going to get lost in the weeds of software that you need to install on your computer that sends out the signal before it even gets to Zoom. And all of that is diving way deeper than we have time for. But I just want you to know this: Zoom is do-it-yourself, and you can learn how to do all of these things. I worked with a team of 7 or 8 staff to produce a virtual gala on April 7th. And in what might have been complete overkill, we had a large number of people involved. And if you look on the screen right now is a selfie I took while we were in our last rehearsal. This was our final rehearsal for the show. This was our 15th rehearsal for this particular Zoom gala. And every one of the people that you see on in that little window on the screen there, every one of those people had a role in that show. So the list of jobs that we had presenters, and this is your on-screen talent, the virtual gala chairs, your MC, host, or auctioneer, hello, executive director, president of the board, or anybody who's providing testimonial, and anybody who is honoring honorees or being honored. Then you have the director, and their role is to make sure that the show is on track, that the presenters are in front of their cameras when they need to be, that they have their mics turned on and ready to go when you need them, that the videos play, and that they have a backup plan for where to go if something fails. Audio muter and unmuter. And this sounds kind of silly, but you need one person whose job is to mute and unmute speakers and presenters so that you don't have a bunch of background clatter happening all the time. And also so you don't have people staring at the screen doing that thing where their mouth starts moving and nothing's coming out, right? You can't hear them. Presenter video spotlighter and unspotlighter, and their role is to spotlight the camera video of the presenter on screen that share what we want live to make sure that that is what people are seeing and not other smaller windows if other presenters happen to have their cameras on. Video playback. Somebody whose role is just to queue up and play various videos during the run of show, and it should just be one person, and they need to practice this a bunch so that it is a smooth transition, and what you don't wind up with is 5 to 10 seconds of them trying to figure out how to share their screen. Finally, on-screen graphics. This is the person who shares their screen if they want a thermometer or whatever else shown. And again, it should be separate from video playback unless the person who's doing those things is really, really skilled at multitasking. The other option that Zoom offers is Zoom Meeting. And Meeting has the least control over what attendees can see. It is really organized chaos. Attendees can see the camera feed for everyone who is the meeting, whether you want them to or not, simply by choosing what view they're seeing. You can choose to watch your production in active speaker, which means whoever's speaking is on the big, or they can watch it in gallery, aka Brady Bunch mode, which means that they can scroll through everybody, even presenters and attendees when you have an active screen share happening. It's excellent if you want to be able to see your crowd. It's challenging if you don't want your crowd to see every live camera while your event is happening. The one thing Zoom meeting does is it enables breakout rooms so you can have a large gathering, then break out into smaller groups. I did a presentation to the Association of Fundraising Professionals last week, and we had 3 presenters who did 10-minute presentations each. And then we broke out into smaller breakout rooms for a Q&A with, so that people can have access more directly to each presenter for a Q&A, and the speakers just rotated through the 3 different breakout rooms. So taking this idea and running with it, you could have a large cocktail reception or wine tasting and then break out into smaller tasting rooms for more intimate gatherings with VIPs or vintners. The thing is that you are going to need a director for not just the entire event. You're going to need one for each breakout room so that the person conducting the tasting or whatever can focus on their presentation and not focus on any sort of tech support or troubleshooting that people might be having while they're in there. The pros of Zoom. Well, it's inexpensive, right? The most you're going to spend on Zoom webinar for 500 people is $150 as a 1-month fee, right? You can learn how to do it yourself. If you've got the time to commit to it, you can learn how to do it yourself. It is the most ubiquitous video conference software out there right now, and we are all familiar with it. The cons of Zoom. We are all familiar with it. It is difficult to brand and produce creative-looking productions. It's difficult to incorporate elements like the slideshow of an auction items and presenters at the same time. You can have either or, but if your auctioneer is full screen and your slideshow is in the tiny little window, then you've just wasted a bunch of time designing something that can't really be seen. And if you got the big screen with the auction items on it and your auctioneer is tiny, then you're basically paying just for voice and not for any sort of video reaction. The biggest problem, the biggest challenge with Zoom, though, is at its heart, it's teleconferencing software. It has a low frame rate. It has high audio compression, probably has some video compression built in as well, because you can hear the difference and see the frame rate difference. See the frame rate difference when you're watching something on Zoom. That video that you work so hard to produce looks and sounds worse than you want it to when you're broadcasting it through Zoom. And breakout rooms, like anything with Zoom, come with a lot of variables to manage, and you can't guarantee every user is going to have the same experience. Without going deep into these weeds, suffice it to say that there are limitations around assigning people to breakout rooms. They don't work the same for every browser or every operating system. So if you're going to want to do this, you need to research this option and do some experiments with it with people on different modes that you think they might log in, on their tablet, on their phone, on their computer, all the different operating systems, because even in that AFP thing we did last week, we had some issues and wound up having to adjust on the fly, even though we'd done dry runs. And there are other do-it-yourself applications out there that are similar to Zoom, but none near as ubiquitous, and all come with the same sort of challenges, and Zoom is the most do-it-yourself. The other option is to work with an AV company to produce your gala. And anyone who has attended one of our previous webinars know that we are fans of this approach. It gives you the ability to create a look and feel for your gala that is unique, that is engaging, that has more than one element on screen at a time, that offers seamless transitions between components in a production that looks more like TV and in fact can be streamed to your TV. And whether your virtual gala is a remote produced live stream or an in-studio production, the question is, what technology do you need? Well, if you're doing a remote produced gala, and this means that all of your presenters are going to be in their home or office broadcasting to you, whether it is professionally produced or it is do-it-yourself, your presenters are going to need to get their video signal from their home or office to the internet. So each one of them is going to need a computer, a camera, and a microphone. The computer, and we say this so many times, I think we say this 3 times in this presentation alone, computers have to be hardwired to the internet. They have to be directly connected. You cannot rely on Wi-Fi for your presenters in your virtual gala. The camera can be built into the computer or it can be an external camera. You see my little external, this is my rig, by the way. You're looking at my messy desktop, and on the top of my screen, you can see my little camera. It's an external camera. External cameras and newer built-in cameras have similar image quality. The microphone, it is important that your presenters have an external microphone. Earbuds for iPhone, Apple, AirPods, that kind of stuff, they can work. There are also plenty of low-cost, decent quality external cameras and microphones out there in the $65 to $150 range. I'm not here to say you should buy this one or that one. Just do your homework, look for good reviews, and you can find something that's going to work for you. Once your presenters have microphones and cameras set up, they simply log into a virtual studio using a link provided by the AV company, or they log into Zoom, and then their camera and audio feed can be plugged into your broadcast. Sounds simple, right? If you're doing a studio production, you need nothing. Your AV company is going to have everything. You just need to be within driving distance of the studio location and be able to bring whatever information you need to the bear. But once you've chosen the production, then it takes you on to the larger question of how do you start actually preparing your production?
Program flow, and now we're getting into more of my kind of content. So crafting your run of show and defining your content are topics that go hand in hand and can be a little bit of a chicken versus an egg conversation. And regardless of how well your virtual gala is produced, technically, if it doesn't have good content and a good flow, it's still going to feel flat. So we've talked in some other webinars about how you need to streamline your content for a shorter time frame and move certain elements closer to the beginning, and all of that applies, but you still need to create a narrative arc and a natural flow for your event. So where do you start? Well, you start by defining all of the elements that you want included in your virtual gala. There are some elements that are becoming sort of standard, pre-show broadcast loop. You know, you're going to have a welcome message. You might have additional messaging from your staff or board or testimonials, a fund a need, perhaps an auction, maybe some entertainment. Depending on your event, you may also have awards, tributes, or additional spoken remarks. But the first thing you're going to do is define the elements that you want in your program. And then once you've defined all those elements that you want to include, then you need to start crafting your run of show. So literally start mapping things out. Put them in the order that you want to have them go in. Estimate how much time each element is going to take. See where those things are starting and finishing. And when you get everything in there with a start and a finish time, see, do you need to trim for time because you've gone way over the amount of time you intended to go for? Or do you have room to breathe and maybe can give a speaker an extra minute or add in another video? But like, you have to start by really mapping it all out. And once you've got that run of show drafted, now you can turn your attention to creating content. And this is where a lot of your time is going to be spent in your pre-production. So your content is going to be a mix of live presenters, pre-recorded video, and your slide decks or PowerPoint displays. So you still want a cohesive design for your virtual gala, and each of these items is going to need a look and feel. So if you typically have a theme for your gala, there is no reason to abandon that now, because you can still do a lot with the design of your event and keep something that is unique and creative and special to you and doesn't look like just a webinar that everybody else is presenting. So let's talk about some of those different elements. So pre-recorded video. Video production is something that feels like a huge stumbling block for a lot of organizations, and I totally get that. It's a situation definitely where there is a right fit for every budget. So if you have a budget and a capacity to hire a professional videographer to create all of the videos that you want to have included, like absolutely go do that. Like, I love a professional videographer. That may not be your budget though. Maybe you already have an existing organizational video that you want to use for the fund a need, but you then have speakers that you want to have make remarks, but you need to get those recorded and you don't have the budget to hire a videographer. That's totally fine. There are a lot of DIY methods that you can use to create videos of your speakers. Some people are using Zoom to record the remarks. They're just having someone log into Zoom, give their presentation and recording that. Newer model iPhones and iPads are great for video. I'm having a lot of clients send me videos that were shot on iPhone. Windows and Mac both come with very simple built-in movie and video editing software that you can do all of your recording. You can also take a video that someone has sent to you on iPhone and iPad and just like trim off the beginning and the end. There's definitely stuff that's built in and like out there DIY for you to create these videos. They don't all have to be super highly produced. Another big component that you'll have is your slide decks or your PowerPoint. And when you're designing your PowerPoints and your slides, you really need to think about how they're going to be used in their program. Are they going to be shown full screen or will they be picture in picture? So when I do professionally produced galas, typically the pre-show slide loop is shown full screen. So any thematic or design or branding needs to be incorporated on the slide. So you can see on this slide, I've got the organization name up in the top left. There's some text on the bottom. There's a sort of scroll, frame on top of the bottom of the slide, but it's the only thing on the screen. So it needs that to have design. But then when we got into the auction for this particular event, so now we're picture in picture with the auctioneer on screen. This is actually auctioneer MC and the live auction slide, which is PowerPoint, and the background graphic, and the link to register for the event. And you can see that it starts to look a little busy. So in this case, my PowerPoint slide, it didn't need to be designed as heavily. Like we so typically come up with a frame for a PowerPoint and just like stick everything in it, like regardless of how it's being used. And in a ballroom or in a tent or at a live event, that's fine. But when you start looking out on a screen, like you really need to start thinking about like, how does it integrate with everything else? And that is my key takeaway here, is to really think about how everything works together and design accordingly. So I had Greg go back to this slide because this is an example. This is from an event that I just did a few nights ago, where we've got all of our elements on screen here. On the top left, I have a full screen pre-show broadcast loop that has all of the design and branding for the events. On the left bottom, we have, this is what it looks like. Well, this is actually pre-recorded video from the VIP or the VP of Philanthropy giving his opening remarks. And you see we still have incorporated bits of the branding. Top right, this is from our funding needs section. So we wanted to incorporate that brick wall to keep that going, but now we've changed the background of the screen so that we don't have brick on brick in our background. And then on the bottom right, we've gone back to, the brick background because that was kind of the look of the event. We have our auctioneer to one side, and then the PowerPoint for the auction slides, they didn't need a lot of design around it. It needed to have an image and say lot one so people could stay on top of where we were. So we really had to like map out like what is going to be on the screen at each individual point in the event so that we could design accordingly. And then live presenters. So live presenters, as mentioned, need to be on an Ethernet connection and not wireless. It is one of, if not the most important tech takeaway that we can like impress upon you. If your presenters are in their home or office, they also need to have good lighting. And this can be natural light from a window, or you can get a very simple ring lights available on Amazon and elsewhere on the internet. You're going to want to test your lighting for the time of day when your virtual gala takes place. And related to this is virtual backgrounds, because virtual backgrounds are a super hot topic. So virtual backgrounds work best if your presenter is front of a true green screen. There's a very specific color of green that computers are able to chroma key off of. Green screens are also readily available on Amazon, less than $100. And then if a presenter is using a green screen, either they can insert a virtual background if you're on something like Zoom, or your AV company can do it if you're doing a professionally produced event. So a couple of things on that green screen and also on lighting. So your background image is something else that you would need to factor into your overall design so that you understand how everything would be working together. And then on the testing lighting, this example on the screen is from one of my April events where we had our lovely CEO giving remarks earlier in the portion of the program, and he had a blue drape behind him, and we were able to insert a virtual background. And then as the gala went on and the sun went down, his blue drape got darker and all of a sudden became a color that we were no longer to insert a virtual background on top of. So that's where having good lighting and really testing out that lighting for the time of day when your gala is happening is a really critical component.
That brings us to the end of the production portion of today's webinar. We're going to cover a few top tips as always. And tip number one, we've said it before, but we're auctioneers and we love to repeat ourselves. Think of AV for a virtual gala as booking the room, in the sense that you would never wait until the week before or even the month before to call up the hotel ballroom or whatever it is you normally use and try to get them booked. And AV is pretty much your room at this point. That is going to be where your gala is taking place. And they only have a finite number of events they can do on any given night of the week. In fact, Tom at Deluxe is currently saying Thursday is the new Saturday for September and October. If you are using music in your virtual gala, make sure that you have the rights to the music. YouTube aggressively tracks that down. And so you don't want your production to get shut down either in real time or after the fact if you're using music that you don't have the rights to.
Tip number 3 is just to be creative. Like, your virtual gala is really only limited by your creativity. And one of the things that we've been seeing is that events that were happening in, March, April, May, like, they had to flip really quickly. And a lot of their event design, it was reactionary, and they were successful. Like, don't get me wrong, they were definitely, successful, and people, that's why we're still in this world. But it was more a reaction to, okay, this is where we are now. We just have to make the assets that we have already work for us. And now if you're looking at an event that's, August, September, November, like, you have more time to plan, and you have more time to spend in pre-production, creating videos, creating graphics. So, just don't be creative, because that's really your only limitation here. Another tip that I have been encouraging my clients to do is to encourage attendees to share photos using a hashtag. So they're posting things on social media of them as part of the pre-event cocktail receptions and wine tastings, or just as they're watching the event from home. And then we're pulling those off of social media and including them at the end of the event and as part of the closing loop. So it's a great way to have your attendees feel a little bit more connected, and they get to see themselves on screen.
And I love this picture that you put up on the left, Beth, because it's so meta. It's one of the presenters wowing at herself being on screen, because the part that she and her husband, the co-chairs, they were the co-chairs for that event. They did that part pre-recorded, so it's totally meta. So get your presenters to take photos and put them up early to get the ball rolling on that hashtag. If you do a live auction, you really need to work with your auctioneer and also think to yourself that this is a different sort of pace. And what we're more focused on is pitching the concept of the auction lots and hyping them than spending time trying to rattle numbers and really try to push the bidding, because with lag and latency and everything else, the pace is different. So you want to work with your auctioneer to embrace that.
Tip number 6 is just that it's always easier to edit than it is to design. So start early. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you don't know what you like on screen until you see something bad on screen. And I have definitely had that experience with my own events where I think everything looks great, and then I'm watching it in real time and I'm like, oh yeah, I would totally have redesigned that if I thought about it. So start early, figuring out what kind of theme or design or branding you're going to have around your event. If you're working with a graphic designer, or if it's your production company that's doing the design for you, start early, give them some direction, give us some direction, your creatives, and let us respond to things in a way that then we have enough lead time to show you, say, hey, like, what do you think about this look versus that look? And then you can respond to it, and you'll come up with a design at the end of the day that you're much happier with.
One other note is that it's easier to plan virtual and pivot live than it is to plan live and pivot virtual from an attendee expectation standpoint. I was recently on a planning meeting for an event that's going to be in late September, and we're still like, this could be an outdoor small event, 150 people. Theoretically, it could be outdoors or it could be virtual. And the development director was saying, I think I'm going to plan on having it live, and then we'll pivot virtual. And one of the committee chairs piped up, and I told this, I love you. Will you come with me everywhere? Because the speech she gave was so impassioned. And she said, no way, we cannot do that. She's like, what we have to do is we have to plan on having the best darn virtual event anybody's ever seen. We need to market it as such and get it out there as such, and get everybody on board for being at this great virtual event. And then if we have to pivot live, nobody's ever going to complain. But if it's been 2020 has been a year of challenge and growth and disappointment. And by disappointment, I mean, people were set on this expectation of, oh, we're going to be live and now going virtual. And virtual has been a perceived disappointment in many ways. And so what I'm saying is flip that around, make virtual the hallelujah. And if you have to pivot live, nobody will ever complain. I always used to say, if you're throwing a great fundraiser and it happens to be a good party, excellent. But if you throw a great party, it's always harder to get people in the room for a good time and then get them to give you money. Well, in this case, it's always easier to get them signed up for an awesome virtual experience and then have to pivot live. Which brings us to our final tip, and that is, it is still early in this whole virtual gala thing. there is still time for you to learn how to do a virtual gala. And we believe in you. We're here for you to help you, but also think like it's only been 90 days since this all started, right? And I am not an infectious disease expert, but what I do know is that if this is the way of the future, if this is what we're going to be doing for the short foreseeable future, there is still time for you to jump in with both feet and learn, because it's not like you've missed the boat. We don't even know what the boat is at this point. With that said, thank you as always for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Beth and I are going to turn on our videos and we're going to start answering questions in just a second. You can submit your videos in the Q&A box, and I see by all the lack of questions stuffed in there.
Well, one question I see in chat for Sue, yes, there will be, it is recorded and we'll send a link out to everyone. Greg will do that tomorrow-ish.
Yes, tomorrow-ish.
Yes.
I think this is the first time we've gotten to the end of one and not had a bunch of questions waiting for us, which is hey, you know, we'll be done early, but also it's kind of terrifying because I'd hate to think that we actually, there's so much I know we didn't cover that I'd hate to think.
Right.
That,
it is that whole 90-day thing. Ever since you said that to me yesterday, that's been blowing my mind that this has only been our reality for 90 days. It's crazy.
Thanks for all the time. Ken wants to know, what is a great bidding platform? Ken, well, thank you for asking. Beth is very fluent with?
I use Greater Giving. That's my preferred online bidding platform. I feel like it's the most robust. It's also very easy for your auctioneer to interact with right now. And that is something that's super important. My second step after Greater Giving would be possibly GiveSmart.
And Beth and I have had many conversations in the last 90 days about knowing what our respective lanes are. I used to know what my lane was, and now it's just all over the map. I'm answering questions that I never really wanted to have to engage with. And so it used to be, as a live auctioneer, I would say like, hey, I know Greater Giving does great work. If you use them, fantastic. If not, all I really cared about in a live auction was that you can write your bids down, get them entered into a system that keeps you happy, and get your people to pay before they leave. And Greater Giving does that great. But if you use something else, more power to you. It's a personal choice, like your auctioneer is a personal choice. Now that we're doing these virtual galas, all of a sudden bidding platform impacts my ability to raise money for you in a way that can be enabling or extremely detrimental. And so the next webinar that we're going to do a month from now, because I need a couple of weeks to just sort of decompress. It's been a crazy 90 days for all of us. But the next webinar we're going to do is going to focus on bidding platforms quite specifically. We're getting a lot of questions in chat, and we're getting one question in Q&A. So let's go to the person who followed directions and answer the Q&A and then bounce over to chat. Maureen asks, what are our thoughts on ticketing versus open to all? If you are going to charge a ticket price for your virtual gala, then your virtual gala needs to have something at its core that is going to encourage people to spend the money to be there, right? And so is it just entertainment? Is there some reason that people are going to spend $25, $30, $150, $500 a pop to attend your virtual gala? You know, unless it's Justin Timberlake doing an a cappella performance for, you know, your crowd only in there, you're probably not going to be able to just charge the ticket price. So what you need to do is, like always, offer something else that justifies the ticket price. So one of the ways that we're seeing people justify ticket prices is by having some sort of virtual/live experience that takes place before the actual gala itself, or some sort of real experience, food, wine, whatever, that is delivered. So what I'm kind of rambling, so let me focus more laser-like and say Manhattan Beach Education Foundation, which is an event that Beth and I just did a little over 2.5 weeks ago. They had a large gala open to everybody via YouTube Live, but beforehand they had virtual tastings that people had to subscribe to at least a week in advance. They ranged from $75 for a beer tasting to $125 for tequila to really high-end wine for $300 or $400 per household per tasting. And they worked with vintners, are totally on the ball on this. They pivoted excellently to virtual. They've got shipping built in. It's their business model. So you spent your $400 or whatever it was at least a week in advance. The wine was shipped directly to you so that you had it. At the gala started at 7, so the virtual tasting started at 6. 6 o'clock, everybody logged on to their respective virtual tasting. And then at the end of it, and it was in Zoom, right? Yeah, okay. And at the end of it, in the chat button, chat bar to the right, they put a link to the actual virtual gala, and everybody just clicked over to that. So somewhere between $75 and $400 per household, they sold over 250 households worth. And obviously the ticket price that they charged for that had profit for them built in, I'm presuming, right? I mean, I haven't seen the books, but I'm presuming they build a profit in. So that's one way that you can charge a ticket price. I know Beth has seen others.
Yeah, so far, I only have one event that is two events that are charging for access to the virtual events. Like pretty much everyone else is, you can log on, watch our event, bid in our auction for free, and we're only charging a ticket price if you're either getting a meal delivered or wine delivered or participating in a wine tasting or something like that. I personally would rather be able to cast the net wide and say, hey, come on in, watch my event, like attend it, participate in it, and spend your money in my auction or my fund a need, versus charging somebody just for the access to view the event. That's sort of the philosophy we've been taking.
And to piggyback on that, to talk about like things that you can offer to people to make the to make those ticket prices for the virtual. And so there's a question: is this tasting the same day night as the gala? Yes, it's leading right into the gala. But for example, if you're offering food, and you can do varying ticket prices for different food offerings, and the highest offering you could have would be for somebody to host a table, to have 3 or 4 couples come to their house to have a viewing party of your virtual gala, and to provide them with a meal and wine and everything else delivered to encourage that, in which case you're able to encourage your supporters to gather and have fun while supporting you, but also you're justifying table sponsorship and higher ticket prices.
So I want to answer one of the questions that's in chat. There was a question about, can we talk about YouTube Live? I would love to talk about YouTube Live because I think this is something that gets a little fuzzy for some people. So YouTube, if you have a YouTube channel, you can enable your channel so that you can do live streaming on YouTube. And then there are 2 different options for how that works. And thank you, Sue, for my lovely sequin backdrop. So YouTube gives you 2 options for streaming an event. You can do like a true YouTube Live where I'm in my office, I turn on my webcam, I click, start streaming, and I'm just going to talk. It's definitely more like single presenter. Like I couldn't bring in any other presenters or do any like picture-in-picture types of stuff or whatever without additional software. It's pretty much like, it's single presenter out to camera. What you can do in YouTube Live is create a broadcast feed using other software that you then push to the stream of your YouTube channel. So this is what I've been doing when I've been working with AV companies on professionally produced galas, is that we're using the AV company's broadcast software and we're just pushing that stream out to YouTube. So guests are going to YouTube, watching the video there, chatting in the chat bar on YouTube, but YouTube is just like the repository for our broadcast feed. We're not creating the broadcast in YouTube.
Between the auctioneer, the AV company, and the event coordinator, how collaborative is the production process? Typically, is one of these persons the main conductor of the virtual event? Well, I'm going to say this without my tongue in my cheek and say it depends a lot on the auctioneer with whom you're working, but I have a very strong relationship with Beth as an event planner, and I try to bring that same approach to every other event planner that I work with, and say, in a live event, I know my lane, and I am good at staying in that lane. In a virtual event, I'm learning my lane. I think we're all trying to figure out what it is we do, but my goal is always, I don't want to be making the decisions on design. That's not my strong point. I had one client when I was an interactive marketing consultant who hired me to design their websites. And after I had come up with the first iteration of the design, they just said, keep the deposit, and walked away. I'm not the person who should be doing your design. Somebody like Beth or someone else is. So the goal is to come in and all work together. And one person's going to take the lead on that. And in an environment like Beth and Tom and I at the Lux, we've defined that well. In other environments, you're going to have to define it as you go, but really it's going to come down to who's designing the graphics because they're basically the director of the show. But Beth knows better than I do because she's actually directing a lot of shows.
Thank you. Yeah, so it is going to, your mileage is going to vary a little bit depending on who your players are. But I think the way that it works best is that you would bring on an event planner, someone like me, who really is acting as your show producer. And so I'm going to project manage the events. I'm going to help define for you all the deliverables, when they need to be done by, like all the sort of parameters around it, help define who is responsible for certain things so that we know who is producing certain elements, so that we're not duplicating efforts. And then I will typically liaise between the client and the AV company so that the AV company is really focused on like the technical production, and I'm helping you get there, develop your run of show, working with you on your script, like collecting all of the assets for you. Whether you are, some organizations will then have an external or internal to them graphic designer who is designing PowerPoint slides and background graphics and things that they hand off. I do a lot of that design for my clients. That's sort of, I've been able to fold that into my services. And then auctioneer, the same, auctioneer, depending on who it is, they're going to be more focused on working with you on your auction lots and like what those should be and sort of weighing in on your fund to need, and less involved with the technical production of the show. That's going to be more on your show producer and your AV crew.
And to add to that, I would say one place that I found actually is in my lane more this year is I'm being asked to MC and host a lot of events. So then we're talking about crafting script and coming up with ways to be involved in that run of show that enable my performance and my ability to engage with the crowd, without necessarily needing to be, a drama queen and take over the entire production.
And I would say that as a show producer, he can weigh in on script, but I maintain the master script. That's my document, because I put cues in that me and my AV crew, like we use to actually call the show. So he can write some stuff, but then it's my document to maintain. So stay in your lane.
But it's one big open highway with just brand new pavement stretching into the future with no lanes printed on it at all right now. Somebody asked a question in chat that's getting pushed up at this point that I want to go back to. What is the biggest misstep that we think people have done? I don't want to out anybody at this point because I think it's I think there's one gala that I did and it was and chalk this up to early, but they engaged me 2 days before their event. And so we had no time to do any planning to come up with, to say, hey, you really ought to use some sort of bidding platform. And so we took all of their pledges for their fund to need in chat. And they had a wildly successful event. They raised over $900,000, which was woohoo. And a month later, they were still $100 and something thousand shy of getting all of it because they didn't have people pre-registered and they made some errors in how they recorded chat. And they remembered that one of their major donors, was possibly from London and had to go back and try to figure out who that might be. And it was just a big mess. And so I think, not getting people registered with credit cards at the beginning of that event or having contact information with credit cards tied to it was a huge mistake. And there are bidding softwares out there that totally circumvent this problem and make it a piece of cake, which is why we are advocates for them.
I would say related to that, I feel like the biggest misstep I see people either make or almost make is not being strategic with their budget, right? Like I realize that budgets are all sizes, events are all sizes, like not everyone's going to be able to spend the same amount of money, but instead of just looking at the costs and saying, oh my gosh, we just need to slash expenses and just like cutting them unilaterally, like being strategic about like there are certain things that you may need to invest in, whether that's auction software so that you can get people pre-registered with their credit cards, or deciding to go with an AV company because you don't have someone within your organization that you can get up to speed on Zoom. About like, we understand you need to make choices that are right for you, but like being strategic and making sure that you're making the choices that are going to give you the best event that you can hold, and not just like, well, we cut our budget and this is what we have.
Ooh, any comments on audio quality? Should all on-screen presenters be wearing lavalier mics? I don't think you need to go the route of having everybody wearing a lavalier mics, because lavalier, you know, unless you're in studio and you're in a place, but I don't want to send a lavalier mic to somebody at their home and try to coach them through how to utilize it and everything else. I mean, I think, as we said in the presentation earlier, like if they're presenting from home, the earbud microphones are sort of the least expensive, easiest to use for most people. Beth and I both use, and this isn't an ad for them, it's just a statement of fact. Beth and I both use Yeti blue microphones. I have the, you know, hey, look, check it out. I have the exact same one, except hers is actually blue. And this is the mic I use for all my virtual galas. So just, I think finding what people are comfortable with and sounds good, because I think the lavalier solution would be a pretty big issue. Does the DIY Zoom event have any latency issues? Only if you're trying to do bidding in real time, or react to bidding in real time. Otherwise, there's latency in every production. I mean, there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 25 seconds unless you're using Twitch. And I would argue that you're good luck getting your donor base to log on to Twitch. Have we seen a trend in terms of auction items? We had a travel heavy prize docket last year, and do you see this declining at all? So here's the problem. We are not infectious disease experts, and it is really hard to predict where things are going to be, how people are going to react in a month or two, right? September and October, really heavy auction lot months this year. There's going to be a lot of events happening there. What auction lots do we think people should be having? Well, we can talk about what's been successful so far this year and use that as a basis. I was lobbing the pitch to you, Beth.
Oh, sorry, I was typing an answer to a question.
Oh,
My bad.
okay. I'll keep rolling with it then. Live theater, people. Live theater. Welcome in. So there was some data that was released a little over 4 weeks ago from a lot of events that have been taking place virtually. And it said that auctions are averaging 80% of what they would have expected to raise in a live event. And the fund a need / paddle raise / raise your paddle / stand up and shout, whatever you call it, those are averaging way over 100%. In that breakdown of the auction items, what we saw was that international travel is selling for 80% of retail, or lower. Actually, no, it was 72% of retail. Local travel is selling for 92% of retail. Just straight gift certificates, like here's $100 to go to your local restaurant, selling for 99% of retail. Wine and beer was 135%. Home and garden and other basic shopping was 125%. And the VIP dining experiences, whether it's the chef to come to your house or the virtual wine tasting dinner or that kind of stuff, was selling for 172% of retail, which does not surprise, because as long as I've been doing this since 2004, the dining and entertainment has been the hottest ticket item in a live event. And I think one thing we've all come to grips with in the last 90 days is that we're really tired of cooking for ourselves. So my family and I went out for brunch yesterday, and it was the first time we've gone out to eat since, I think, February, definitely early March. And it was a completely different experience. Everything took much longer. We ordered our food before we left the house at 2:30 in the afternoon and got there and sat down, and it still wasn't ready until 3:30. And it really got me thinking, and I had a conversation with Beth afterwards when we were doing our rehearsal for this. It really got me thinking about what's going to change in terms of a cult. How's our culture going to change in terms of expectation? Everything takes longer now. You go to the supermarket, you have to stand in line, sometimes for 20-something minutes to get in, here in San Francisco anyway. You want to eat at a restaurant, you got to order everything in advance. You order, you no longer go into stores and browse, you submit via the internet. How does that change the expectations of our bidders? And how does that change what we can offer them? And I think right now, like food and dining is going to be as hot as ever. And I also think that we're in a position to start talking about like really interesting access. So to go to a store and be able to shop with no one else in there and be able to try clothes on, like right now, that sounds like amazing, right? And so I think start thinking about what would you want to do right now when trying to craft your auction lot experiences.
So question coming in about how to involve families during the gala. Given that everyone is home, it may be harder to keep kids away from the call, especially for elementary schools. So that's a good question. I've done several school auctions. So one thing you can look at is just what time you're scheduling things. I've had some organizations that purposely scheduled their event after bedtime, so that hopefully kiddos were in bed, and that's when the event was happening. I had another school that what they did was they hosted, in tandem with the gala for the adults, they hosted a Netflix watch party of movies that were age appropriate for the different grades. And they were an event where parents was part of your registration for the event is that you could purchase like a boxed meal, a catered meal that was delivered to you on event day. And then we also delivered snack packs. So if you had a kid and they're going to be part of the Netflix movie watch party, like they had popcorn and snacks delivered to them. So it was like, go watch a movie, while mommy and daddy bid in the auction. And we just had teachers for the school that were helping facilitate the watch parties for the kiddos.
And my son's school, they had their virtual gala back in March or April, whenever it was. One of the things that they offered actually was, I wouldn't say it was an auction lot, but they had 3 really popular teachers who all agreed to this in advance. It wasn't like they threw this on them the night of. And they set up their greater giving so that you could make donations in those teachers, each of those teachers' honors. So you could, teacher A, teacher B, or teacher C, and they set the increments really low at $10. So you could donate in any $10 increment, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000, whatever, right? And whichever teacher got the most donations in their name at the end of the virtual gala, they did karaoke live, which was really fun. And so it's like, if you're going to have your kids involved in the gala, then there are ways to have your kids involved in the gala, because every kid had an opinion about which of those teachers should be performing karaoke. And the science guy who did Bohemian Rhapsody at the end, for life. For life.
And for those of you who are on an earlier webinar and saw Greg use the karaoke example, I am never singing Oklahoma for you. People are still asking. It was purely an example, but thank you for your interest. So one of the questions coming in is, how do we handle auction item pickup for any physical items that are hard to ship? And if we are shipping, are winners paying the shipping charges? So yes, for most events that I've done where there have been physical items that needed to be shipped, we have charged shipping costs to the winning bidders and just tried to be very open about that. It's part of the description and restrictions of the item so that people understand, like, this item would be shipped to you and shipping charges will apply. Depending on where you are in the country, where we are in the year when you're doing the event, you may be able to have, a curbside pickup day where people can come to your organization and pick up their auction items so that you get out of the shipping. I think whichever route you go, you just need to communicate it, decide before your auction so that you can communicate it very clearly, so that if someone wants to bid on something but doesn't want to have to pay the shipping charges, they're not getting surprised with that after the fact.
And to piggyback on that, you need to do your research on selling wine online and shipping wine. You might be able to ship wine locally, but you might not be able to ship it out of state. Your vintners know the answer to this question, but you definitely want to make sure that you know that what you're doing is going to be within the bounds of the law. And I work with an event that has a lot of goods in its silent auction, typically, riding lawnmower, that kind of stuff. And they don't want to be responsible for having to ship that. So what they're asking is for their donors who purchase that stuff to actually hold off on purchasing it and have it shipped directly to the winning bidder. So basically, take a screenshot. This is what I'm going to buy. This is what it's going to be. Here's the blender or whatever. I mean, I'm not recommending either of these things as auction items. I'm just trying to think on my feet. I'm obviously not very good at that, but they're going to have their auction items. They'll know, like, I will buy this for you, and then I will have it drop shipped directly to the winner, which I thought was a really clever way of circumventing the whole shipping concept.
Yeah, and I did that. It wasn't necessarily a virtual event, but it was more of an online auction. I was working with Dairy Queen and Children's Miracle Network in January. And, Children's Miracle Network was in Utah and Dairy Queen is located in Minneapolis. And we were having our event in New Orleans. And it was like, are we putting all this stuff on a truck and like taking it with us to New Orleans to like set everything up? And we were just like, no, like, we're not doing that. Plus they had restaurant equipment, and we just set up with a lot of the individual donors, like, we will send you the name. And it was part of their donation that they covered the shipping so that the winning bidder didn't have to incur that additional charge.
Thoughts on best time of day for a live virtual auction? Most of them are happening at night, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock start time. I did one that started at noon because we were raising money for food banks internationally, and the executive directors of those food banks needed to be able to be involved. And at noon was going to be 10 p.m. their time, and any later that we pushed, I mean, we couldn't do it at 6 o'clock and expect them to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So that worked. But I mean, think really about what time is your crowd going to be wanting to do it, right? If you're going to be doing a school crowd, and are you going to want the kids up or asleep, right? Because if it's going to be the kids are still up, then you're going to start at 6. If the kids are asleep, then you're going to start at 8, 7. Beth?
Yeah, I feel like most people are keeping close to what their kind of original time was. You know, if it was 7 or 8, like I'm at 6 o'clock seems to be my magic hour for when gala. I feel like everybody's starting their gala at 6. The only ones that I've done earlier than that have been where we're working with the multiple time zones, and we know that, you know, a school in California maybe has grandparents in New York that are going to want to watch the auction, and so we've shifted things earlier to accommodate bidders and attendees in different time zones. But I feel like, you know, anywhere between that like 5:30 to 7:30 is when 90% of these things are starting.
Cool. I was just scrolling through the list of attendees.
Did we
Good to
miss anything?
see a lot of you here. I wish that we were having, I think we've said this every time we've done a webinar. I wish we were having all these conversations in person. I really do. I wish I was wearing out the tires on my car and putting engine wear on it and driving up and down the state to see y'all. I really do. This is not where any of us wanted to be or expected to be this year, but I think there more questions, bring them, because we got a few more minutes, but I think
Greg and I will talk.
Yeah, I'm an auctioneer. I'll talk all day if you let me, sometimes a little too fast. But I think one of the things that's really been uplifting for both Beth and myself has been not just that this virtual gala thing became an opportunity for us to try and work this year, but that it's working for our clients. We are both in the nonprofit realm because we believe in helping organizations make a difference. And we know that this is a tough year to not be fundraising. And so the opportunity to be able to jump in and find ways to help you raise money in the midst of what is, I freaking hate unprecedented times. And if somebody else says we are all in this together on a commercial, or we're all family again, I'm going to throw something at the television. But the reality is that this is, never seen before. Hopefully you won't have to see it ever again. But now that we're in it, we're finding ways to really make the most of it. I think we're seeing a lot of galas that are doing not just good, but great. MBEF, the Manhattan Beach, from a couple weeks ago, they set a record. The event that Beth just did on Friday night with St. Joe's set a record. People want to be engaged. Netflix, we're all at the end of Netflix. I got to that screen that says that's done, right? Move on. Okay, here we go. Some more questions. How often, if ever, does the subject of the pandemic come up over the course of the event, or is it just the elephant in the room? I think every event that I've done so far starts with we wish we were all together, but we're not, so let's make the most of it kind of message. Beth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, is it the elephant in the room, or does it come up? Like, yes to both. I think that a little bit of it depends on the organization. I think that some organizations who are in service-related fields that speak directly to like obvious critical needs have an easy case to make, and performing arts companies, for example, like have to maybe spend more time like making the case for why we still need to be raising funds. So I think that it's important to address in a very genuine, authentic way, like why it is important that you still keep fundraising. Because you can't just stop, but you can't ignore what's happening, and you can't ignore that people are being affected by what's going on.
And every nonprofit that I work with, I ask 3 questions. Has your need increased this year? Do your clients need you more than ever? Do you need to raise money this year in order to get through or to survive? And if you answered yes to any one of those questions, then we should be talking. And if you answered yes to 2 or more, where's the save the date? And and I'm not trying to be glib, but I mean that's the basis for the messaging for doing the virtual gala. If you like, there's no reason to just do a virtual gala. There's no reason to just do a gala. It's a lot of work, but the payoff is there, right? And so piggybacking on what Beth said, like the messaging is always built into it, and it's like, yes, you acknowledge it, but also if the reality is that that's what it is, then tell that story. We're not here to just gloss things over, right? We're talking about open and honest engagement, as always. Ken, yes, if you're on this, and you used an honest to goodness email address and weren't some TikTok teen who just decided to register for our webinar and tried to get one by on us, you are now going to be entered into our database, and we will send you a newsletter. Hopefully it doesn't go to spam, and we are planning on doing the next one of these, as I said, about a month from now. We're going to go over different bidding softwares and talk about all the ways that can be done. Janelle, good to see you all the way from Florida. Have we tried the one screen platform like Qtego or Event.Gives? Not yet. We might do as they come along. I think without diving too deep into the weeds, I watched an Event.Gives, and for those who don't know, Event.Gives is a bidding platform that enables you to have your screen, and on your screen, there's just a button for people to bid, so you can see what's happening, and then they can bid in real time. And I have to be really honest with you, I am not a huge fan, not of their software, but of that approach to auctioneering on a virtual gala. I think one of the challenges is that we are used to controlling the process. And when we have control of the process, and we can look at people and say, okay, 3,200 is bid now, 34, 34 now, 36, 36 now, 38, 38, woohoo, now 4, right? Like that's exciting. And it's fun. And what makes us good what makes us good auctioneers in person is our ability to look someone in the eye and to determine whether they're going to make the next bid or not, and to cut bait when necessary and move on. And I always make the joke that fair warning is my safe word, because I'll be like 38, go 4, bid 4, yes 4, fair warning 4,000, now 42, bid 42, go 42. And it's always that last bid that people just, oh, 42, fair warning 42, now 44, fair warning. And like we go back and forth like that. Online, it is so incredibly boring to watch an auctioneer try to work a non-existent crowd. So I've been, in preparation for this, I watched a lot of auctions, virtual auctions take place with bidding software where the auctioneers were really trying to work the bids. And as an auctioneer, I have to say, it wasn't my favorite thing. But I'm going to try and incorporate that into the next webinar a month from now.
So getting a question in Q&A about an organization where the event normally takes place in November, but are thinking about pivoting to virtual as early as mid-July, and is that a good idea? Basically, is sooner better than later? So, you know, I think it depends on some bandwidth. I think that there traditionally for live events, a lot of people shy away from the summer because people are on vacation. Well, no one's on vacation this year, so you might as well do your event in the summer because people are around. Like if you can have your event earlier. I think in general for planning, the more time you give yourself to plan something, the better off you are. You know, Greg got brought on to an event 2 days in advance for one of his first. My very first virtual gala, we flipped in 4 days. And like, you can make it happen in a shorter time frame. It is not what I would recommend. I feel like most people, not most people, the earlier events, people were taking anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks to go from live to virtual, and that can be done. But we sort of mentioned before, a lot of that was more of a reactionary approach to like, well, we can't have it in live, like we just have to have it virtual and we're just going to have to make do. And now that people are seeing more of these events and they are getting more sophisticated expectations, I think giving yourself the time to really plan and be creative and have the exact event that you want is going to be better for you long term. Now, maybe they do it in September instead of November. Like November to July feels like a really big change, but maybe they do push it up to September to shorten up that time frame, but you would still have, you know, 2 or 3 months to get things planned.
Excellent. Well, we're over time, so we appreciate those of you who stayed on with us for this long and listening to us talk. We always appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the conversation and to share our knowledge. Thank you, Yen. We appreciate the props. And again, to all of you who have asked, the webinar will be available via recording. We'll try to get that out as soon as possible. We send an email tomorrow to all of you to follow up. As always, you can find information for how to register on our website at stellarsf.com. You can also find Beth's awesome webinar, which still holds water a month plus later, as one of the great webinars on how to do like introduction to virtual galas on her website at bethsandefur.com. Thank you all for coming. We look forward to seeing you in person as soon as possible, but virtually the next time. Take care.